Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar this morning. Hope you're all doing well. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak. I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator here. Today, the webinar topic is the nitty-gritty on sole source contracts and unsolicited proposals, something I know a lot of you are very interested in, and it is led by Olesia Smitrova-Taylor, who is President and CEO of OST Global Solutions, Inc. We're going to get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Alessia your questions, and you can do that by typing them in the chat box on your screen. We will pause for Q&A at the end of the presentation. As always, a copy of the slides will be emailed to you afterwards, and this is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. For those of you not familiar with Maryland Apex Accelerator, it's our mission to help Maryland businesses to compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. So if you think you need help, please complete our client application form, and we will get you. Right now, the waitlist is about 30 business days. Okay, over to you, Alessia. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Yasmin, and welcome everyone. We're going to be talking about the nitty-gritty on sole source contracts and unsolicited proposals in this changing world of government procurement. So this webinar is going to be very different from the way that I normally teach this webinar because of so much change going on everywhere. And you guys are probably very aware of that. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. Unfortunately, I had a skiing accident and I broke my right arm. So I'm not as nimble with things, that I normally kind of am very good at actually juggling all the different screens and everything else. So please bear with me. And I'll try to monitor the chat and answer things as they come up. But if they don't, that means I'm just not scrolling fast enough with my left hand. Again, Olesia Smitrova, I am actually now a Chief Strategy Officer of OST Global Solutions, and I have a CEO, David Huff, so we swap positions. So thank you so much, Tony. And so, yeah, we swapped positions, and so now I'm doing a lot of the strategy and the kind of things that I love to do, which is designing training courses, software, and things of that nature. All right, so let's dive right into it very quickly. OST Global Solutions, we're a Maryland firm, and we won our clients over 26 billion in government contracts since 2005. We have an incubator for government contractors that focuses on SBIRs, SBIR proposals, and we work in conjunction with Maryland Technology Economic Development Corporation, TEDCO, on a lot of really interesting initiatives that you should keep track of. The one that's coming up very soon is the Bridge Proposal Lab that essentially allows Maryland small businesses and Delaware and Virginia and DC small businesses to apply for a cohort that will create a pipeline for you, and a cohort that essentially will help you develop winning proposals, team up together as part of that cohort. So watch out for those announcements. There's going to be a competitive selection process to get in the lab, but that support is going to be available. That's funded by the Treasury. So be on the lookout for that. We also have excellent newsletter that tells you about what's going on in the government contracting world and all the different vehicles coming up. And we have an apprenticeship in government business development. It's a Maryland registered apprenticeship, so you actually get a lot of funding from Maryland and tax credits from Maryland for participation in that. So it's a year of training that essentially is largely reimbursed if you fit the rules by the state of Maryland. All right, so let's dive straight into the class. And the way that I like to do this is just to handle business development is you have a lot of complexity where it comes to winning business with the government. And there's lots of process and workflows, and there's lots of steps. But I always like to be very pragmatic about approaching this, especially from a standpoint of a small business and or a business that is really trying to do things economically because you're in a highly competitive environment, and therefore everything boils down to only 5 things you need to do, and you need to do well, right? That is to identify opportunities that your company can win. That's number one. You have to have a pipeline. Number 2 is eliminate competition and get a sole source award. Eliminate competition altogether, right? Why bother? And get a sole source award. This is what this class is about today. And then if you can't eliminate competition, you need to reduce competition, right? So reduce means pick some sort of a vehicle where your competitors are not on, or work with the contracting officer to reduce the size of the NAICS code, like pick a different NAICS code that basically excludes some of your competition, right? So there's different techniques to reduce competition. Those are just a couple from a whole list of what you could do to reduce competition, but you get the gist, right? Now, another goal that is really, really important is to excite the customer about awarding that contract to you. You want to get them to see the vision you see about the solution. If you can have that one-on-one or anything that you can submit to them that gets them to see the solution to a problem that they've been trying to solve, and you're the one who is getting to solve it finally for them, that's the nirvana, right? You get the customer excited. They know who you are, and they are waiting for that proposal from you. And you want to make every action and step count towards developing a winning proposal, right? So that is where you want to make sure that every single step that you take, every meeting, every strategy session, every brainstorming session actually is a graphic in the proposal, a paragraph in the proposal, a win theme in the proposal, a pricing element in the proposal, a teaming partner in the proposal, right? So it is very proposal centric. Whatever you do in BD and capture is very proposal centric. That's why BD people, the capture people who work up front to fill your pipeline, to fill your portfolio of opportunities, need to understand how to write winning proposals. And people who write you winning proposals need to understand how to incorporate the win themes and everything else that gets developed early on in the whole life cycle. So those are the basically very pragmatic set of goals. We're going to focus on eliminating the competition and getting the sole source award. Now, again, as promised, I'm going to couch that in the sort of the field of uncertainty that we are all living in with the current administration change and the new set of priorities and the impact on government contracting. So the first item here is micro purchases. It's a form of a sole source contract because you don't really need to go competitive under $10,000. Now, there's some exceptions for construction, for example, is 2000 Service Contract Act is 2,500. Emergency type operations outside the US are all 20K. Inside of the US is 20K, outside is 35K. And during contingency operations and emergencies, you also have those same limits, right? So what does that mean? The government has a purchase card that they can use to go ahead and just buy services from you. If they just call you, they call a source, a vendor over the phone. They can do a very simple kind of purchase, and you are there doing the work. And it's very fast, very efficient. So what's going on right now is there's been a limit set on those purchases of $1. So currently, all of a sudden, companies who very much depended on these micro purchases cannot function, right? So we had a client of ours that just folded the business because they didn't survive this. They were payroll to payroll, and unfortunately, this freeze terminated that company. So counting on that, so kind of the lesson learned from you is do not keep all eggs in one basket. Right. So as a business, you need to diversify. And when you completely depend on some sort of a payment or some sort of a contract, you really want to kind of secure yourself against that kind of situation. But I mean, unfortunately, for some agencies and for some companies, it is really, really tough to operate. How long is that going to last? Well, this is a measure that is lasting through the continuing resolution. As you know, the continuing resolution was passed. There were some budget cuts that were made within that resolution. There was a priorities change and the shifting of the budget that took precedent there. We don't know what the president's budget is going to be yet, how the cuts are going to reverberate through the government, how everything is going to be reflected in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So all of that is being rejiggered and changed. So there is some delay there, but the continuing resolution and all of the Doge activities essentially are impacting the micro purchases here. So again, it's a very different presentation, very different class today because there's so much that's changing in the government procurement. Another common form of sole source awards is the awards under the indefinite delivery vehicles. So many sole source awards happen on IDVs. That's where the majority of their companies literally that will claim to sell to the government, and they do a lot of the times, and they will do the sole sources specifically on different vehicles. And what you need to do is you need to look for charts like that for major vehicles. Like this is NITAC, which is the NIH CIOSP, and in this particular case. This is the process, right? And when you get into this rectangle here, you see that is it a fair opportunity, yes or no? And that's what you're looking for on that map. And then if it's a yes, there's a competitive process. But if it's a no, there's exception to fair opportunity. That's your indication for where they have the sole source rules. And then they have to document their rationale for exception. You can help them. Hopefully you have that dialogue with them where you actually can help them document that rationale for exception. We're going to talk about the rules for that today. And then determine best value, lowest cost alternative. So that's where they kind of look at it. And they do their own documentation, and then you get under award very quickly by bypassing all of the different kind of competitive hurdles that you have to go through. Now, notice here, you have a micro purchase threshold, right? So what I was talking about, the 10K threshold. So when it says yes, you use a purchase card to place order, record purchase card lot, and then the vendor ships item, right, or delivers item, and there we go to that final stretch again. So as you notice, there's all these different processes. Tony is asking, what is an IDV? IDV is an indefinite delivery vehicle. That is a vehicle that basically says, I don't know how much I need of something at any given time, but I know that I need something repeatedly, right? I need to buy HR services on occasion when I hire people. I know that I'm going to need that a lot in the next 5 years, but I'm not going to need it every time. So I can issue a task order when I need it, but I want to select a vendor for that to be available, on tap. And it's so basically you know what it is, but you don't know when and where, and how much, right? So you basically get on that vehicle. It's like a hunting license. So some of those vehicles are really huge. So CIOSP, for example, for NITAC is really, really huge. Now, let me take a step back and actually tell you about how is it different from BPA. Kumar, BPA is an IDV. It's just an IDV that is actually falls, most BPAs fall under GSA, although you can have a non-GSA BPA. BPA is a type of IDV. IDV is a broad category. GSA schedules, for example, fall under IDVs. That's why they're vehicles. They're not necessarily contracts. IDIQs are contracts. Vehicles are also agreements or yeah. So they're basically the ones that can agree on the prices, but they're not a contract because contract has money tied to it. All right. Now let me now caveat in today's reality. There was an executive order that is setting back the clock to the good old times when GSA was the primary agency making purchases, pre-acquisition reform, and they're trying to shift all of the acquisitions for IT, for services, for professional services, and everything else to the GSA to make it one central hub so that you don't have different agencies buy for themselves, decentralized. So everything is like, for example, we have GWACs, right? They're saying, well, we're going to do away with the NIH GWAC, the CIOSP3, move it under GSA, and move NASA SOUP under GSA. It's still under discussion. It's not decided 100% because those are very successful vehicles. This would have a huge impact, of course, on Maryland. It would have a huge impact on all of government procurement. For example, NASA SOUP works like a clockwork. So it is an amazing, it's probably the best vehicle in the government right now. So you're going to see that if that shift happens, it's going to be a massive amount of disruption, more than what it is even right now. So for those people who are actually delivering IT services, IT hardware, and IT support, so it's just something to watch out for. Hopefully they don't do it. Hopefully they leave those two vehicles alone for NIH and for NASA. But that's what they're doing. At the same time, they eliminated the majority of the positions at FedSim. FedSim is an organization within GSA that is very bright. They're the best and the brightest in government procurement. So we have like this kind of a double-edged sword of essentially well, it's a dual effect of eliminating the best and the brightest, like 18F, like FedSim out of GSA, the best thinkers, and trying to move all of the procurement under GSA. We also don't have a lot of answers as to how it's going to happen. What exactly is the timeline? How is everybody going to deal with the contracting officers in all the different agencies? Right now, there is, oh my gosh, hold on just a second, guys. Right, I apologize, guys. I have a 9-year-old who was cooking himself breakfast who's on vacation. Shh, Simon, I'm teaching a webinar. All right, sorry about that. It's the joys of having a kid at home from work, from school. All right, let's thank you, Tana. All right, so I have a question here from Dietra. Do you think that GSA will be able to sustain supporting nationwide efforts to support the nation's needs? My personal opinion, not when you have removed the best and the brightest from the agency. It's going to be a very painful process. I'm not exactly sure how the administration is planning to move all of the different contracting officers from all of the different agencies into GSA, and there's a pause on the warrants issuance to the contracting officers. So there's a lot of very interesting initiatives that are happening in the agencies where now the agency heads have to approve the invoices and the invoice payments. So it's a lot of inefficiency that's being introduced in the process. So it is a very scary kind of proposition to me, but from a perspective of strategy, as a small business, especially trying to secure yourself in the government contracting, my advice to you is focus on GSA a little bit more closely. Make sure that you're on a schedule. Make sure that you've updated all of your different categories. Make sure that you've updated all of your products, all your pricing, that because GSA is going to be a very important player one way or another, whether everything is going to be consolidated, but or only portions of the government contracting are going to be consolidated under GSA, but they're going to be playing a very prominent role. So that's something that you really need to heed. And with that said, there's a lot of attention to the sole source awards right now. So there's orders that are basically telling the government to pay a lot more scrutiny as to how those sole source are being issued. Anything that has to do with $25 million and up that concerns Super 8As. And Super 8As are the Alaska Native corporations, Native Hawaiian organizations, NHOs, the community development corporations, some of the Native-owned corporations. So those are the Super 8As. So you want to look at at all of these very, very closely and how things are justified. So I'm going to give you a bunch of tips here. So Angela is asking, how do you get on the schedule? So you can go on the GSA website. They have tutorials on how to get on a schedule. Majority of the work you have to do yourself. If you need help, ping us. We can help you. So there's of course a cost associated with that. So that's the sort of the gist of that. But generally, majority of it you can do yourself. It just takes you time. So a lot of the times the person you work with will just make sure that it all gets collected correctly. It all gets put in a package correctly. Again, nothing you couldn't do with tutorials. The tricky part is how you price things, because you're going to have to live with those prices, and they will penalize you if you give anybody else discounts below those prices ever. Even if you're desperate, they will give you horrific penalties of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so you don't want to do that. So you have to be very careful with how you price things. So you need somebody to help you with a pricing strategy. Now, Oasis Plus is different than a GSA schedule. That's a vehicle, an IDV, indefinite delivery vehicle, that the GSA is using, and it's right now been put on pause. But once it comes back, then it's going to be super duper important that you get on it. Any GSA vehicle that's out there that you can get on, you really should get on, because this is the agency where a lot of things seems to be moving towards. So you have to take it very seriously. All right, so 7 authorities on issuing sole source contracts. And many believe that you have to be a small business to get sole source awards, but the majority of these awards go to large businesses. And the large businesses, it doesn't matter if it's a small business or a large business. How do they justify sole source? Number one authority for that is there's only one responsible source, meaning that you're unique. So you have unique research capabilities, unique supplies, unique products, unique services, something that the government sorely needs to issue a contract follow-on while competition would lead to unacceptable delays, or there are other similar reasons for that. So there's an unusual and compelling urgency. There is might be an emergency like major hurricane aftermath for countries in the wartime, or there's some sort of like an expansion needed that could be justified in terms of that, like Amazon Web Services, sole source expansion with the NSA, for example. Kumar is asking, do we need to be on these schedules to get awarded with a sole source? So schedules is a way to cut down the competition. Schedules is a way to streamline the competition. They're different from the vehicles like Oasis, for example, or Alliant. So all of these are different vehicles that they were specialized in something very specific that has a scope of work. I mean, schedules are also very specific, so you do need to be on these vehicles to get a sole source under them, correct? In general, you want to be either in a joint venture on those vehicles as a co-prime or a prime contractor. If you're too small, try to form a joint venture. So a lot of the times they're called a contractor teaming arrangement, CTA, and it's kind of a form of a joint venture. GSA CTA may have more prominence, and GSA CTA is when both contractors that are forming, or three contractors that are forming a joint venture, they all hold a GSA schedule, so everybody has privity with the government. So you're co-primes essentially on that. So so maybe if you're too small, try to form some sort of a joint venture. All right, so the third reason is industrial mobilization, engineering, developmental or research capability, or expert services. So you have really anything that's really specialized the government's trying to buy from a specific person. Or there's an industrial mobilization, for example, in the country. So then you have other authorities, you have international agreement. So when a foreign government is funding something and they want their own firm to do the work, they may actually designate that because they're paying the money. You may have also authorized or statutory kind of sole source. And you see a lot of that for small businesses, right? So because you see that 8A program, HUBZone Act, Women-Owned, Economically Disadvantaged Women-Owned, and Veterans Benefits Act programs be under this. Now, let me again preface or add to this discussion of what's going on right now. Programs that are kind of in danger, 8A and HUBZone. 8A because it's has minorities in it. HUBZone is because people feel there's too much waste, fraud, and abuse in this one because people cheat too much with that. So you already saw the hardening of the 8A program, where there is no presumption of you having been discriminated against if you are a certain minority. So right now they are kind of really going after the 8A program and the HUBZone very hard. So women-owned and veterans programs are sort of safe. Right, so so they're reviewing everything. Everything is frozen under SBA. They have a lot of reductions in the agency as well. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So that's something to really watch out for. So the other sole source is national security. So when publicizing the agency's needs would compromise national security. So it's the authority used to protect sensitive government operations. So something that's not supposed to be shared on Signal. Public interest, the secretary of the agency needs to determine that using full and open competition is not in the public interest for a specific acquisition. So that is essentially something that the government basically says, okay, you're going to get this contract and we're not going to disclose much about that in the public interest. So now that you know that, right, you need to know your customers' regulations beyond the FAR. That is if the acquisition remains decentralized, right? But at the very least, you're going to have the GSA and defense, the DOD. I don't know if they're going to move everything DOD under GSA. That is going to be a very interesting proposition. I also don't know how it's all going to happen because the FAR Council is going to be involved in that. You are talking about changing the federal acquisition regulations. You're going to be talking about all kinds of major kind of reverberating changes in the whole of government procurement if the consolidation actually happens in the government. So be on the lookout for that. Look at the agency regulations specifically. I pulled the DoD one. They will have different regs that will tell you how you are basically procedurally going about a sole source contract. For example, here the sole source would result from unsolicited proposals that are considered sole source procurements. And then you have follow-on orders. So this kind of gives you a clue as to how things are going to do. They also look at what is the process, and the process is to have an RFQ, request for quotation. So also it tells you that they're going to do a detailed cost analysis, and this threshold is a little higher now, 750K, but they will require the contractor to certify the price, which is a very specific term as to how you do that. So you have to have very detailed quotes and to justify what's going on and then certify that particular price that is accurate. So that's kind of for you to be mindful of the different rules. Now, here's a sole source process for businesses that are not subject to statutory authority. So for the different types of small business set-asides, of course, you have different rules. We're going to cover them today towards the end of the class. But this is how, in general, the sole source process works. All right. So first and foremost, and the government has to determine the need for sole source contract. But your job as business developer is to learn about a need or to make sure that you can kind of work with them to explain to them that they need something, right? You create a need, and your job is then to submit an unsolicited proposal. Now, you could call it a white paper, but it has to have all the vestiges of the unsolicited proposal in it. White papers are often misused as a way to trigger sole source. It is the unsolicited proposal that needs to happen. So then you develop an RFQ or RFP and request a proposal or quote. So the government does that, right? But you are the one who is writing the whole thing. You develop the SOW. You help do the market research, statement of work, right? So you have to give them all this information that's going to make it easy for them to go ahead and draft an RFQ. Again, the easy button. Especially right now, the government's been cut. There's so much fewer resources, the people who are able to do the work. And the way that the cuts were made is they didn't care whether they cut a good worker or a bad worker. They were just unilateral cuts, right? So they didn't cut people who were, let's say that you have this Pareto principle where 20% of the people do 80% of all work. You know how it works in a workplace, right? So that's not exactly how the cuts happened. The cuts happened indiscriminately. So you don't know who is left there and who is left to do the actual work. Though those people, those 20% of the people who did 80% of all the work are now doing 160% of all the work, right? So you really need to help them. So this is where essentially the BDers that need help with market research, the good statements of work, your help goes a long way to ensure that sole source. So vendors, BDers respond with a quote, technical and price proposals with good G&A fodder. So this is where the vendor submits all of that. Now, what is a G&A fodder? G&A is a government document called justification and approval. And that justification and approval is what's used to justify a sole source. That is what you need to help them write. So you submit that proposal and they literally should be able to cut and paste the language from your proposal into their sole source justification document, which is called GNA. So if the better is your fodder, the better is your justification and approval document is. And so the government then will evaluate your offer, and hopefully you've given them really good detailed pricing justification so they can just plop it into their document. You have given them really good language, they can plop it into their GNA using the proper GNA form. And then the government will go and obtain approval from the appropriate authority. Again, in the current reality, those things have become a lot harder. Everything has become a lot harder with the government. We're hoping things are going to shake down. We know the rules, but right now nobody knows the rules. Nobody knows their limitations. So because of that, people are playing it safe. So things are not moving very well in the agencies. So also the government requests the procurement office to issue a purchase order for a sole source contract. That's kind of the final thing you get an email with that attached. There's a signature there. You need to countersign, send it over, and boom, you are under contract. Now, Kumar is asking, once the RFQ and RFP is issued publicly, there will be competition, right? Yes. Once the RFQ or RFP is publicly issued, there will be a competition. Now, in a sole source, what the government does is they have to post their GNA on sam.gov to see if anybody could submit their capabilities in response to show that there's other bidders available. And they'll give you some sort of a deadline. And yes, you can respond to that. It's very hard to guess as to what specifically the government had based it on, because they don't give you enough information to go and disprove why they have decided that some sort of a company is unique. Recently I was researching when a government, probably in reaction to Doge activities, tried to get something under contract very quickly, and a client of ours is very upset because they were responding to the government. The government was going the competitive route, and all of a sudden they just kind of had a knee-jerk reaction. They're like, we get this under contract now. This is a critical thing. And very understandably, right? So they just gave it to the incumbent. And without the competition, they just skipped the whole competition altogether. They extended it by 3 years. And our client had submitted a capabilities paper, but what I had to do is I had to do the research in order for them to do that. That was due on March 12th. And so I had to do the research to see how the GNA could have been written. And what I found from very deep searches is that the incumbent used their software as the unique quality. And so so we needed to counter with the fact that we had similar software with similar capabilities, and that software was and how we would transition the data specifically from the proprietary platform to this other software that we have. So we had to do a lot of research to figure out how to disprove when they posted that public to show that we had the capability as well. Now let's see here. Unsolicited proposals, they often trigger the sole source action, right? So we're going to talk about that. So I have some rules that the government is currently using for unsolicited proposals. Unsolicited proposal is considered unique when when there's no other competition going on at the agency. I have a question from Tana. How will these administrative shifts affect state level procurement processes? So all these shifts will impact the state because a lot of state funding comes from federal funding. And therefore, when federal funding is provided, they dictate priorities as to how this funding can be spent. And how much funding overall you're going to have available. So in some cases, there's proposed shifts, for example, for the disaster spending, right? So you have right now FEMA is being reassessed as a federal agency, and there's a talk about disbanding FEMA and moving all that money under states. That means there's going to be new opportunities for companies that are doing emergency assistance, emergency support, anything that has to do with temporary shelters, anything that has to do with disaster relief, right, and recovery. So all kinds of things that may be shifting, so that may increase state dollars. In some cases, you may have cuts in state dollars. So we don't know overall the trend is to cut, but it is, as Doge is really now figuring out, there was not a whole lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. We had a pretty good system. They're not really finding the savings they claim to be finding. So whatever they're posting on the website is being disproven very quickly as either ceiling values of indefinite delivery vehicles, IDIQs, or they're posting contracts that have been mostly already completed as savings. So then they deleted those savings. So there's not a whole lot of fluff. Now they're saying that they're eliminating dead people from the Social Security or something like that. But there's some payments now that are being frozen. Which is very interesting because that's a lot of the impact on the voter base of the Republican Party. So you see a lot of people at the grassroots upset and angry because that was not the promise that they that's why they voted, right? So you see a lot of that upset happening. How that's all going to play out, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just here with you guys, just watching this process very closely. And sometimes it's not good for my mental health, but I'm trying to distill it down for you and communicate it very clearly so you know what to do, right? You know to focus on GSA, you know to diversify, don't put all your eggs in one basket, don't count on certain designations like 8A, for example, or HUBZone to be your driver for growth. You want to make sure that you master government business development. You're sticking very closely with Apex and all the trainings. Make sure that you're very qualified. So that's where you kind of need to really focus. And maybe focus if you are in the energy field or energy efficiency field, environmental science field. If you're focused on NOAA, that's being right now largely disbanded, with big portions of that going away. If you're focused on EDA, if you're focused on EPA, if you're focused on Department of Education, that's no more, or USAID, that's no more, right? So like there's a lot of reprofiling that has to happen. So you really kind of need to watch out as to what's happening and diversify your capabilities. So another thing is that you need to study the customer first. Buying history and forecasted procurements, agency strategic plans to figure out how your solution will be pertinent, any statements that clue you in as to how to provide value to the government customer. So you really need to study the customer first, and of course, any priority changes that are happening right now. Research the competitive field and focus on the value and uniqueness, right? So don't oversell on your proposal. Just follow the proposal best practices. Don't use jargon, detail overload, no benefits, technical arrogance. None of that needs to be in your unsolicited proposal. Just make sure that it's not being competitively competed by that agency. It's not being planned to be competed by that agency. There's no big vehicle that is required to be used for these kinds of services. And then if that's not the case, then you probably have a chance at getting it sole source. Now, there are more tools that are being used for enticing the government to award the contract to you and or reduce the competition or influence that competition to get the customer excited to award the contract to you. There are unsolicited proposals, like I talked about. Those are the triggers for sole source. There's white papers and there's point papers. So we're going to talk about what each one does. An unsolicited proposal, right? It is a proposal for a new innovative idea that's submitted to an agency on the initiative of the offering company, like your company. It has to be innovative and unique. It has to be independently originated and developed by the offering company, prepared without government supervision, endorsement, direction, or direct government involvement. That's very important. Don't keep this stuff on record. Don't send emails back and forth. Don't leave yourself up to scrutiny, right? So if you want to discuss what their needs are, do not leave those records, right? So it has to be detailed enough to show that government support could be worthwhile and what the proposed work could benefit the agency's research and development or any kind of other mission responsibilities. Note that the mission responsibilities are changing right now. So not an advanced government proposal for a contract that you know the agency will need, and that could be acquired by competitive methods. So what situation warrants a white paper is when you need to market a solution to multiple customers, right? When you need effective marketing collateral. White paper is not an unsolicited proposal. It's marketing your specific type of solution or service or product. When your solution is not easily replicated by the competition and is truly unique because your white paper may leak to the competition. So now point paper is my favorite. That is a PowerPoint presentation. So you don't put as much information there. It doesn't stand on its own completely. It is just there to entice, to trigger a meeting, to have the customer salivate about something that you're offering them. And that is when your solution is more competitively proprietary. You don't want to just kind of leave that out there floating for everybody. When you want to generate a meeting with a customer very quickly, what I tell people is like, white paper is like showing somebody a leg, right? And in your seduction sort of palette of techniques. And then when you talk about the point paper, you're showing somebody an ankle. Right, so because you want them to have a meeting with you to see the leg, right? So when you are looking to do capture for a specific opportunity, you actually do that. And when you don't want to give away all of the details in writing, you do that. And that's my favorite. I like to have those PowerPoint presentations that are interesting just enough to trigger that meeting. So then let's talk about how you conduct research to ensure the situation is appropriate for a sole source and warrants government action. So you need to do a NAICS search for that agency and combine it maybe with PSC code that essentially allows you to do that. You can go on usaspending.gov and do that. And do a keyword search for that agency as well on USA Spending, and read the agency's mission carefully, any kind of strategic plans, any kind of executive orders coming out right now, right? Because that is going to clue you in. Maybe read the continuing resolution documentation, anything that presidential budget coming out that will give you the sort of the gist on priorities, and identify the part of the agency that may have the interest in their offer. Identify any published information about this part of agency's offering, and then examine the agency's budget. You want to make sure that this is appropriate situation, that they are not going to reject you after you do all this work. And then you have to research the unsolicited proposals process and format for the agency. So this is your standard outline that comes from the Federal Acquisition Regulations, but you need to see if that agency has their own format. Like Department of Energy has a whole tutorial in their own format on unsolicited proposals versus other agencies that just tell you go and use the Federal Acquisition Regulations. So you need to research that, make sure that you do Google search or AI search to know what you're doing. Now, there's a difference between the white papers and the point papers, right? Like I talked about, white papers show the entire solution, point papers tease and invite the government to a meeting, and then you position yourself as a trusted advisor with both of them. So here's some rules of thumb for the white paper. You want to brainstorm on customers' needs and pain points. You lead with the customer's need and context. You sell your solution. Don't make it so technical that you forget the benefits. You may add a case study or make the white paper about a case study. And you want to keep it well researched and professional. And if it's not used as a broad marketing tool, you kind of need to include a portion that resembles a statement of work so that the government can reuse it. And you state a pathway of how the work would be completed. A vehicle, a contract, sole source. Now, here's some good practices for a point paper. You want to make sure that you are not talking about an opportunity directly that you're trying to capture. If the government told you not to talk to them about that, you can actually talk about something else, but have an indirect pitch about your capability. You want to relate the bullets to the opportunity, not necessarily talk about the opportunity. Don't exceed 6 or 7 slides. It's a teaser, right? And include your capabilities and contact information at the end. Now, white and point papers may lead to meetings. That's your goal. So you bring your best subject matter experts. Don't just show up yourself as a business developer or business owner. Bring in your smart people who are your residents. Be prepared to offer alternative solutions and discuss specific applications right there at that meeting. Do more customer research to understand who you'll be meeting with and how to talk to them. And prepare for fact-finding and follow-on action. Now, then you have the next steps with the government after that, right? What happens after you submit an unsolicited proposal? They will let you know that they've received it. I cannot guarantee you when You're going to hear that, but they're sort of supposed to do it within 45 working days. Right now, we have a lot of uncertainty when it comes to that. So unsolicited proposals will be evaluated by appropriate personnel who work in the same area as unsolicited proposal in question, and evaluators may ask you clarifying questions. There's eval criteria. You can look up that eval criteria in the FAR. And the technical office sponsoring the contract is going to support recommendations with facts and circumstances that rule out competition and furnish the necessary funds. Now, that is a similar process of how, in general, if everything centralizes at GSA, it's going to work. It's not going to eliminate your need to talk to the customer. You're going to still have customers that are funding customers at different agencies, and then GSA is going to handle the procurement. You still need to have that dialogue. Now, Kumar is asking, who are usually the stakeholders and do they provide contact information for evaluators who provide IT services? No, they don't, Kumar. You have to research all of that. There are databases that are available that give you lots of government contact information. You can also go on websites and look them up. You're going to have to do LinkedIn research as well. So there is, it looks like there's people here consulting on that. Yeah, but you can actually subscribe to different databases like GovWinIQ, like Bloomberg Government, like Technomile. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that actually give you that information, and that's where majority of the government contractors get it. You can find it on the agency website. It's just really looking for that closely. Lots of the government workforce is going that way. Now, Yvette is asking, is there an unsolicited proposal template to use? That outline, just paste it into Word and you're going to have a template. It's in the slide deck, and I'm going to send this slide deck to Yasmin, and she's going to post that. Now, is your unsolicited proposal a mere normal development or extension of existing program? They're going to look for that. If that's the case, they're going to deny you. They also will see if they were trying to prevent a competitive process, if you were trying to manipulate the process, right? So you have to be very careful. You have to know the rules. So you want to make sure that you don't break any of those rules on this slide. And when the government develops an RFQ, you want to work very closely with them. Bring your technical staff, write the statement of work yourself, give it to them. Make sure that the entire requirement is covered, can be justified, and work out the plans for G&A preparation, right? So you basically have the supplies or services to be acquired that are unique to a contractor. You need to show that time is of the essence and only one known source can meet the government's needs within the required time frame. Data is unavailable for competitive procurement, and basically it's necessary that the item be acquired from one source be compatible and interchangeable with existing equipment. So those are the vendors who have something proprietary, and it needs to fit. Also, use the techniques appropriate for market research. You have to do the market research as if you were the government. And here I have the different techniques that are in blue and in black. It's kind of hard to see. I apologize for those people who cannot see the difference in this. But in black is what the government can only do, but in blue is what you can do. And those are all the different techniques the government will use. But in blue, you can use your research and you can use all these different databases. You can go to a library, or if you're connected to a university. Some apexes, I'm not sure if Maryland Apex, and Yasmin, you may weigh into it, have agreements with the universities to use their libraries. I haven't heard if Maryland did or not. But there's different kind of resources available here for research. I talked about the SAM.gov notice. They will advertise that they're trying to use a sole source contracts, and you can have a protest or a capability statement submitted as an intent to protest. And there are proposals for sole source procurements, right? So you want to avoid starting with vague requirements, and you want to have a very clear statement of work. Technical evaluation has to be limited to a review of the technical proposal. It has to be simple and straightforward. There's no eval criteria. Cost justification has to be important because the government is in a weak negotiating position. The auditors usually review only the labor costs, subcontractor proposal materials, overhead, and G&A. So you have to have all of that documented very closely. And you have to make sure that you have the review of the design, and the lead time for processing a sole source award can really vary. Right now, I would expect to have longer time frames than the shorter. Now, for G&A content, you want to give them a really good rationale to award the contract to you. And you really need to focus on the uniqueness, and you basically have to make sure that you looked, the government actually has the cut and paste language that is beyond just lack of planning, and has the really good cost justification, has the description of market research conducted. It has the different substantiation and any kind of other information there as well. And I know that I'm running over a little bit. I'll try to go through this very quickly. You can have those slides as a leave behind. I talked a lot about the changes today in the market. But what to emphasize in the G&A is uniqueness, immediacy, emergency, legitimacy, inadequacy. And what you watch out for is not confusing something being urgent and something being unique. You have to be very clear. And you want to make sure that the product is a product of original thinking. You have intellectual property rights secured. And don't say that you're the best, because that's not a competitive process. And lack of planning, incumbency, administrative delay are not justifications for award. And you want to avoid simple statements regarding compatibility or any kind of other ambiguous reasoning. And so the government has different thresholds for sole sources for Super 8As. And Super 8As and others, right? So right now the threshold is being adjusted. So $4.5 million limit for various services and products, and $7 million for manufacturing. And that's being changed. There is a rule change in the SBA. It's being adjusted for inflation. So watch out for that going up. But right now we have sole source awards exceeding $25 million or $100 million without with the G&A, without the G&A. So those are the kinds of things to look for. Those are still the same. And there's eligibility for sole source awards. So as long as the lifetime aggregate does not exceed $168.5 million, which has been raised from $100 million. Now for 8A sole source process, you're gonna have the very streamlined process. It takes about 2 weeks to award an 8A contract. It's very simple. You have to talk to the contracting officer, and basically they don't have to advertise on SAM.gov. They can go directly to a contract with an 8A firm without any kind of delays. They have an automatic approval. A contract copy is just simply sent to the SBA. So that's how the process works right now. So that is a very straightforward, simple process to get under 8A contract. That's why the 8As have been historically preferred. That's why this administration right now is upset about that. So SDVOSBs and HUBZones, they're almost like 8A, but there is that rule on a reasonable expectation that 2 or more SDVOSBs or HUBZones will not submit the offers. That rule is not applicable to 8As. So that's why the government, they're almost the same rules, but that one little rule is what makes a difference. That's why the government doesn't really award that easily to SWSBs and HUBZones as they do to 8As. They basically have all kinds of other stipulations on that that you can read as well. And women-owned and economically disadvantaged women-owned, they have certain NAICS codes. There's a 646 NAICS codes that were designated for women-owned set-asides and 113 for economically disadvantaged women-owned set-asides. So that is expanded list based on the most recent census. And essentially, they still have that reasonable expectation rule here as well. So 8A still continues at the moment to be the easiest way other than GSA contracts. So let me see if anybody has any questions before we run. So any last minute questions?
Thank you, Alessia. That was great. Yep. Any other questions that you'd like Alessia to tackle before we wrap up? Yes, you are going to receive the recording and the slides as soon as Alessia sends them to me. As she explained earlier, she has broken her arm, so she's moving a bit slower. So we'll be patient. So no, it doesn't look like it. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating today and to encourage you to look through the slides and, maybe rewatch the video and share it with your team once you get it. And I've posted some links on there as well for signing up for our future training classes and events. So thanks again, Alessia. That was great. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.